True Talk, brought to you by Trueland Equipment. Join us as we explore cutting-edge machinery, groundbreaking technology, and inspirational stories from the field.
From the dedicated efforts of our team members to the triumphs and challenges of our farmers, True Talk brings you along every step of the way.
Whether you're a seasoned agriculturalist or simply curious about the industry, tune in to discover the fascinating intersection of technology, agriculture, and green machines.
True Talk, cultivating true conversations.
Welcome.
Welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, well, we haven't even introduced you yet.
That's an unfamiliar voice.
Yeah, who is that?
Who are you?
This is your cue to introduce yourself.
So I'm Stephen Schwartz. I'm the Agronomic Value Lead for corn and soybeans at John Deere.
That sounds important.
That is
Really
a very
important.
fancy title.
Yeah.
It's a very fancy title that means I'm a sales and marketing agronomist.
Awesome. Yeah, so you've told us a little bit about yourself, but do you want to give us a little bit of insight into what that means and what your day-to-day responsibilities look like for John Deere and kind of why you're joining us today?
Yeah, so agronomy at John Deere is newer, and sometimes folks are a little bit confused. Like, why does John Deere have agronomists? What are we doing as agronomists working for John Deere? And I actually think it's really important to have, because what the agronomy team is doing is helping to support, develop, and discover the agronomic value of all of our equipment solutions. We can't always rely on productivity or fuel efficiency or more horsepower to sell equipment. And so to meet our customers where they are and to be thinking about their needs, that's why we have an agronomy team. So there's a couple different aspects of agronomy at John Deere. There's the folks that work on new product discovery. So they're trying to understand what's the next really valuable agronomic thing that we need to be developing for John Deere technology. Think things like See and Spray, Exact Shot. We've been working on those for several years to develop the agronomic story for these products as we bring them to market. And then there's me. And my job and the other folks on my team, we work with John Deere dealers and customers all across North America. I work in North America. I also have counterparts in Europe and South America and all over the place. And our job is to help develop the local economic and agronomic stories for the value of our equipment solutions in our farmers' backyards.
So I want to highlight the acronym that we will now be using since you introduced it. So from here on out, we will refer to that likely as our lead trials, which we'll be getting more into that and what some of our lead trials for this year were.
LEAD, local economic and agronomic decisions.
Yes, sorry, I didn't spell that out again.
No, it's that trial network that, again, really puts the value back onto our customers' farms. There's a lot of data and information flowing at customers these days. You think all of the podcasts and books and information that's out in the world. Farmers can sometimes be confused about, like, what's the right data to go look at? What do I need to be doing? And our approach is to bring those trials right to the farms where our farmers operate, and maybe not on like a research farm in the central part of the state on the best soils. Hey, let's take it to your operation in the soils that you farm on.
That means a lot, I think, because let's be honest, there's trials everywhere. And like you said, they can get inundated with trials and inundated with data, but it means something to growers to have that local flavor, to have that research done on their farm. And it means a lot more to those growers.
And now there's responsibility with that, right? How do we make sure that we're doing trials that are valuable to our customers, that are valuable to our dealers, that are actually providing good insights, and then also do it in a structured, rigorous way so it's not, so it's valid. So it's valid and valuable and it's trusted data. And so that's what a lot of the folks on our team work on, is how do we make sure that these full field strip trials that we're doing are valid and valuable for our dealers and customers.
And there is some that, and we'll probably likely get into this later on in the episode, the validity process of that and why we might choose or you might choose to do that.
And it's really important. We're not just getting rid of data or saying, hey, this isn't valid on a whim. It's because there's things like environmental conditions that's going to flood out a field and it's going to have an impact on our locations, or there's it's not statistically significant we need to call that out, and we need to be open with that about our customers, because the information that we put out there with the John Deere logo on it holds weight and it holds value. And we want to make sure we're not diminishing that by just putting out any results. So we try to hold ourselves to a very high standard when it comes to putting out data and information so our farmers can trust it.
Yeah.
That's yeah, and we've kind of jumped right into that lead plot discussion already. Absolutely. And again, I want to back up a little bit. We've kind of mentioned this in the last couple of podcasts, but is John Deere an agronomic company, and if they are, that to me has added just another way to revolutionize this business. And for us as, John Deere, people that work at a John Deere dealership, or yourself, someone that works for John Deere corporate, put us at a leading edge, of revolutionizing how we do things in this industry, and again, place products and worried about customers' ROI. We're not just worried about selling them a piece of green paint anymore. We're worried about their return on investment and making this technology pay. So working with growers to get the most out of whatever it is they have, whether it's equipment, whether it's technology. The reality is we need to find solutions for them that help make them money, and that's what this is about.
And I think a lot of times folks don't realize that when we bring out a new piece of equipment, there's engineering considerations that we have to hit. There's horsepower, there's reliability, there's durability. There's also agronomic considerations with every piece of equipment that comes out. And our teams are working to make sure that we are delivering the value we say we're delivering with every piece of new equipment. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked, because Josh, you're saying, is Deere an agronomic company? Agronomy really is deep in the bones of what we do and how we bring technology and equipment solutions to market. But I would also say on the technology side of things, man, there's a lot of new tech. But if we're not validating what's the most useful, how do customers sift through what do they need to use on their farm? That's complicated, and it changes by location, and it changes by production system, from corn and soybeans to what if you're integrating wheat, small grains into your operation. And those are things, the considerations we have to make as agronomists to make sure we're providing the best recommendations to our customers.
And I think that there's a lot of people that get lost in the time benefit, the time savings, and the efficiency component. Just from, we talk a lot about, this technology. Imagine what that can do in terms of your son's basketball game, or your daughter's dance recital, or your parents' birthday party or anniversary party. And we talk a lot about what the life looks like of a farmer with this technology, that's utilizing this technology. And I think that a lot of the components that get missed in these conversations are the agronomic components of what that actually means. So we just had Kayla on, and she talked a lot about the grain sample. And we talk a lot about how, you're maximizing that efficiency all throughout your day and your harvest season using harvest automation. But we don't talk a lot about what that means in terms of your grain sample. I feel like we kind of glossed over that. We touched on it for sure, but that kind of gets lost. And when you're proving the agronomic validity of some of those, that's where you guys come in. And I think that it is important for us to have you on and call out the work that's being done there.
Yeah, and I love how you talked about that, because there's so many facets of this when you're talking about, again, the quality of life, and we've talked about that, and then the other side to me is just the fact that we've got all this data, that we've been collecting data for a long time, and one of my claims to fame is that our customers spend a lot of money to collect data, but they've really not done much with it, and that kind of completes that circle. And going back to, I always like to say, for years we said NP&K was NP&K. There was not a lot of excitement. Agronomy's been around a long time. It really has. But, as we've gotten better at placing things, go back to some of the fertilizer systems we're using. And to me, the ExactEmerge planter just a huge game changer in this. And we've got all these amazing ways to place seed and place fertilizer and innovative types of fertilizers. And then you bring in the See and Spray and pulse width modulation to the extent that ExactApply is. And this data that we can collect. I mean, we're just taking this to this incredible level of truly being able to see what we have and what's paying and what's not, and it's a fun time to be in this business. It really is.
It really is, and I think in the data side of things, there's opportunities that we haven't even scratched the surface of yet.
Oh, for sure.
Understanding how I think take ExactEmerge as an example, right? We've had that technology in the market for a long time now, and we have the opportunity to look back on performance and to prove out the value that has been there across the host of planting conditions that we've had. And I know it can go faster, but how is it doing in providing a good job quality,
Right.
and providing uniform emergence and hitting these core fundamental blocks that really get back to a customer's ROI.
Right.
And we can do that by looking at the data and helping, again, to provide a better recommendation for our customers that is tailored to their local situation.
I love going back. I go back to ExactEmerge in every podcast almost. I love it because it was such a game changer. And I was a guy that I was going to hate that technology. You just don't plant over 5 miles an hour, and I'm the old guy in the room, but I was going to be get off my lawn. We don't drive over 5 miles an hour. And so coming up about the time that technology was fairly new, it was about the time I came on board, honestly, and researching that and seeing what it can do and talking about planting windows and the ability to be productive and the placement and again, all the things that have come along with that when you start talking about the exact rate and exact shot and some of these technologies. So it was set a new plateau, I think, that ExactEmerge technology.
And see, my mind instantly goes to ExactApply.
For sure. Yeah.
I think it could be because you have a ExactApply nozzle on your laptop that I'm staring at right now, but nonetheless, that is where my mind
The sticker
goes.
back there?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
the sticker you see.
Awesome.
You got to have computer stickers.
Yeah, there it is, the nozzle body.
Jordan, going back to ExactApply, I would say that's a perfect example of data because I'll be honest, Josh, I have tried to do field trials with ExactApply. It's difficult because what do you do? Like, do you take all the nozzle bodies off? Do
Right.
you can't do the change unless you have two machines in the field.
Right.
And
Mine was going to be turn it on, turn it off a pass, but then your nozzle sizing becomes an issue and some other stuff. But
correct. So there's all these complications. And so, it's really hard to do a field trial, but we have a really good data.
Yeah.
And so that's where we've talked to customers all across the United States and said, hey, did you have a conventional sprayer? When did you upgrade to ExactApply? Were you logging all of that data in Operations Center? We've put together a data set of 15,000 acres of customers' data looking at the quality of their applications with a conventional sprayer, and then how did that improve with ExactApply? And it changes, right, by location, because the more complex your field boundaries, you're going to have a greater benefit. You have more square fields, you maybe not. When we're putting together these data sets to help prove the value.
But you can see it too. You can literally see it on a map. You can see ExactApply. And similar with exact rate, I love the accuracy. I love the accuracy of when you got to spray a field or you got to put row starter on a field with exact rate, coming out of there and knowing that you were spot on product usage and rate and just seeing the results of that. And
again, I feel like that product is something that was marketed as one thing where we ignored multiple other facets of the benefits that come with that technology. And so I think a lot of people had drift in mind when they were purchasing that technology. And then again, you talked about boundaries and field complexity and the added benefit of that. A lot of people didn't think about all of that when they were looking at ExactApply technology. And sure, it was probably a minority decision maker or a factor in their decision-making process. But I think that lead data and just having agronomic data to further that story when we're talking to customers about this new technology is what really makes or breaks a purchasing decision.
And it's spurred newer technology because of it.
Yeah.
Too. Absolutely. It gets you excited for what's coming down the road, that's for sure.
It's very exciting to see what the future of agriculture will hold. And I think John Deere is going to be leading the way.
I'm going to put your Nostradamus hat on. I don't know that I'm going to ask you to predict what your future technology is, but what is this? You're an agronomist at John Deere. I'm an agronomist at a John Deere dealership. What does our future look like? What does your future look like in your eyes in this industry?
So,
because I don't think this is a fad. I think we're here to stay. I know that there are times when things like this happen, and then the next thing you know, it's a done deal. But I don't think this is a fad.
2 weeks ago, I got invited up to University of Wisconsin-Madison to give a talk for the Plant Sciences Graduate Student Council about technology, and it was all about how do we understand how technology is going to be influencing agriculture and genetics and phenomics and all this stuff moving forward. And so it was a day symposium talking about new ways to identify diseases. These are all like non-commercial things. These are what university researchers are working on. And they had all these awesome projects and plot research stuff. And then I got up and got the opportunity to talk about tractor autonomy, furrow vision, see and spray, combine autonomy, a full production system suite of technology solutions. And all the university researchers were blown away by where we were. And they're like, man, if we could just put all these new insights that we've developed onto John Deere platforms with camera systems, we're going to explode our ability to understand plants, the physiology of the plants, to understand the physiology of diseases. So coming off that meeting, I'm really excited to see where all this can go, because I think our ability to look at plants, understand them, and make better decisions is only going to get better from here, especially even as our ability to compute and understand the images that we're processing, right? Those VPUs on a see and spray, for instance, that technology is going to improve almost exponentially. And that's going to give us so many more opportunities in plant physiology, right? I'm a plant physiologist. That's my background. So that's what I get excited about.
So you're talking like artificial intelligence type stuff, or real-time vision cameras, and building off again the See and Spray platform. We talked about that with the combine. You know, See and Spray has come so far.
We've actually talked about this on a podcast episode.
Right. Yeah, a couple times. But when you think about how far See and Spray has come in 3 years, let's just say, that's amazing. And where we can go in another 5 or 10 years with that kind of platform. I think is what you're getting at, using the cameras to do learning and the software. And our comment in the episode we did about the 2025 model year combines was, that first run of technology demo for us was really good. That was a good experience, and you don't always have those. And just to think of what that starting point was, what's that going to look like in 2 years and 3 years? And I get it. I see it. So we've got these platforms using these cameras and these machine learning things, and what else can we weave into that? And it sounds like you've got some pretty cool thoughts about what could be coming.
I think the key is going to be, how do we tie all these data layers together? So now we're going to have imagery from our sprayer, then we're going to get imagery from our combine, and then maybe we can get some images from our autonomous tillage. Then we're going to get imagery about the residue impacts in the furrow with furrow vision, which relate back to our tillage paths, which relate back to our combine paths, which is going to have an impact on plant emergence and growth, which we can identify with See and Spray sprayer.
Yeah. Yep.
Which impacts yield, which we measure with the combine. Like, that is what gets me excited, is as we're looking at all this data from Operations Center, it's going to help us as agronomists make better decisions, and it's going to help our customers make more money.
And I think I don't want to gloss over the fact that we're talking about a lot of these technology advancements, but Operations Center has some room to grow. As we kind of see that product develop into a platform that'll give us all of the data insights that we are looking for, so that customers can prove this exact same data on their own operation.
Well, it's a way to close the loop, right? We can talk about all this field stuff we want. If we can't do something with that information, and you talked about all these layers, we for years, again, I've been in this industry for 28 years. We used the word layering of information 27 years ago, but we've not done enough. We talked about layering, but it didn't do anything for us. We weren't utilizing it, but now we're really utilizing these information layers. And as the Operations Center continues to grow with this technology that we have, I mean, it's stair stepping along with us. Once we get these capabilities, we've got to have something in a platform to take that information and do something with it. And we're really starting to get into the kind of the nuts and bolts of what I felt like layering should have been 20 years ago. And now that we have that ability to do it, it's working, and we're seeing stuff, and it's awesome.
And I think the key is that we now have the ability to layer information at multiple points throughout the season, right? Before we had soil maps, we had soil testing, and then we had our yield map. Well, there's a lot that happened to that crop in between. And then we had a planting map. Well, there's still a lot that happens to the crop in between. And now we're getting more information to track that crop throughout the growing season, understand the stresses, understand the successes that the crop's going to have, and that's going to help us make better decisions.
Yeah. I love it.
Now, I want to ask you guys a question on this topic.
I don't know if that's allowed.
Is it allowed? Reverse? Okay.
I'm the podcaster now.
Fire away.
So when I was at this conference at Wisconsin, somebody raised their hand, an older professor, and said, so guys, as we're going to all this new technology, as agronomists, what are we going to lose when artificial intelligence takes over and when we have the opportunity to look at cameras and we don't need to feel the plant anymore? What are we going to lose?
Stress.
Well, it's funny. I've got to answer this question in a totally weird way because I've always been terrified, again, as someone who, what I would consider myself a bare bones hands-on agronomist, is I was always afraid that I was going to get replaced by a machine. And I think that's what this quote, I'm putting air quotes, old guy, old professor, probably about my age, Stephen, hopefully he's a little older than me, but said, but yeah, we don't see that. We still don't see the people getting replaced. We might be doing different things, or, working with technologies or helping decipher information that comes from those technologies and encouraging grower adoption. But so far the people haven't been replaced yet by the machine. So I've got to throw that out there before we go anywhere else with that question. So Jordan, your turn.
Yeah. So my instant response was stress. And I think that sounds all chipper of me, to say, oh yeah, we're just going to lose all of our stress. No, we're not going to lose all of it. There's obviously components, environmental conditions, and Mother Nature that we have not figured out a way to control yet. I do think that when we have more information and more data available to understand, even as meteorology improves, the ability to make decisions based on what's coming, so a proactive versus a reactive decision-making approach, I think that that's going to make all the difference in the world. And then we structure a little bit, and there's always going to be some reactivity in agriculture. That's just part of it. And I think that none of us foresee that going away. But the more data that we have available, there's tons of products in the marketplace. There's tons of technology options. Even when you talk about something, just planters, for example, tons of technology options, and what pays and what gives you that ROI that everybody's focused on at the end of the day, we don't know. But I think that as we increase all of the available data available at our fingertips, nonetheless, I think that a lot of stress will be eliminated with that.
A lot of information, though. Sometimes a gluttony of information can stress people out a little bit. But I do think, again, the agronomist is alive and well, Stephen. We still have a lot of things to do. We've got to help people crunch data. We've got to understand technology as agronomists, obviously a little more maybe than we did in the past. And
yeah, I think that some of that coming along with that is getting people over that analysis paralysis.
Thank you. Paralysis by analysis. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that, and that is what you're essentially getting at, Josh, I think, is that as more and more data becomes available, we need to do better about educating customers of what can we weed through. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. We talked about what data is significant and what isn't, and what might have had external or environmental or whatever factors that come into play that might not happen any other year, that you might not have to worry about in your own operation, et cetera, et cetera. My biggest question with growers is, what are you going to do with the information? If we collect this data, what are you going to do with the information? That's like the people that use the 2600s and they just wipe the data cards once they get full, and then they continue to do year after year, season after season. I
would also say that folks need to use the data, but as we get more and more data, part of my worry, and this is what I told the professor, is that we're going to lose our emotional connection with the people who do this every single day, right? I was talking to a group of these grad students, right, who all they do is look at data. And I said, have you ever had to tell a farmer a bit of bad news? Have you ever had to tell a farmer that something didn't work? Have you ever had to tell a farmer that he has an infestation of an insect in his non-GMO corn and he's going to have to spray all summer long now? I remember the first time I had to do that. I had a rock in my gut because I felt so bad. I'm like, I'm going to ruin this farmer's day having to tell him this agronomic insight I found while I was scouting for him when I was a freshman in college. And that is what I hope our next generation of agronomists and folks in agriculture don't lose sight of. We can look at data on Operations Center on a phone, but there's a real person and a real ROI and a real farm operation that we still need to be thinking about.
It's always going to be a people business. We have not figured out a way to take the people out of business yet. It's not going to happen. But we're just trying to make it better and easier and more insightful, and again, get a better return on investment. ROI is a huge word, in every business, especially in agriculture. So when we talk about the amount of money we can get wrapped up in technology, which is a lot, if you can prove a return on investment, you're golden.
Yeah. I think that agriculture is forever going to be a faith-based occupation, and it's forever going to be a relationship-based occupation. And no matter how much data, technology, rapid advancements that you integrate into the industry, you just can't isolate those layers out of it.
Completely agree.
Right. But the future's exciting, isn't it? It sure is.
Okay, well, speaking of humans, we did kind of gloss over my business breaker question.
Oh, boy. I just a major faux pas here. I'm sorry.
Why?
Stephen. We spent 20 minutes in a previous episode making fun of people that do anything Christmassy before Thanksgiving.
What?
Okay, so yeah, when did you put your Christmas lights up?
So my wife and I have a plan. And the plan is when daylight savings happens, first week in November, the nights get longer, it gets darker early. We put up our Christmas lights that weekend so that we can fight off the darkness with Christmas lights and Christmas music and start the Christmas season in November.
There are baloney buzzers going off in my head.
not joking.
I think they came up with that reasoning afterwards because they needed an excuse.
Justification.
Right.
To double it, I'm an agronomist. My wife is a chemical engineer. She
Oh my gosh.
she produces herbicides for Bayer.
Yep.
So we're about the most analytical family you might find.
Some really
So-
interesting discussions at dinner
So
time.
when your entire family starts analyzing your movements, and when you decide to put your
Ooh.
Christmas lights up,
I would
that's
also
your
argue
justification.
Christmas lights are great. And if we only have them for 1 month out of the year, we're missing out. So
Well, do you take them down the day after Christmas?
no.
So that's not 1 month.
November to the end of January, 3 months, a quarter of the year is dedicated to the Christmas season.
I don't know. He might be losing some credibility with our listeners.
No.
Do you find joy when you come home and see your Christmas lights?
I do.
That's all that matters,
I find
really.
immense joy.
That's all that matters.
Now you're going to call me a Scrooge, but
No.
I only have Christmas lights inside because they're for me and my joy, not for other people's joy.
Maybe we should have left that out.
Wow.
I love to invite people over so they can celebrate my Christmas lights and how awesome they are. But yeah. All inside.
Good stuff. All right. Are you anybody convinced though? Anybody else convinced that we need to put Christmas lights up November 1 and leave them up till February 1?
It's not November 1. It's when the daylight changes. It's like November 5th. Totally different.
I mean, I get putting them up when like the weather's nice and if you have them hanging on your house, but not lighting them until after
He does
Thanksgiving.
not have them hanging on his house. Made
This
that
is
very clear.
inside, Courtney.
Why would you put up Christmas lights and not turn them on?
Because it's not after Thanksgiving yet.
That's like getting a See and Spray premium system and not turning it on. Why would you even do that? Josh is not loving it.
No. All right. How do we reel this back in,
This is
Jordan?
going to go from Josh's favorite podcast to Lee's favorite podcast real quick.
No.
I'm not Mr. Scrooge by any means, although I did play Mr. Scrooge in the 4th grade musical.
We know the origin story.
But he was a changed man at the end of that, right?
Yeah.
If you got that far into the show, you realized.
Yeah.
So Christmas is all about giving gifts. And one of the most wonderful gifts of the year that we can give to our customers is accurate and valid trial data.
Nice.
See what I did there?
Ah, nice.
Look at that.
Uh-oh, we have a new...
He's giving me a run for my money on the transitions.
He is a new transition guy. That's right. So that was the other part of our podcast. We wanted to get into some of our... take a look and maybe overview of some of the lead plots we did this year. For sure, which were interesting. Some good information, some maybe not so good. So...
not good, just maybe not significant.
Yeah, I would say it was a 20. We talked about it again in podcast after podcast. 2024 was a challenging year from start to finish, and we had some, I would say, challenging planning conditions, which can affect a lot. And you know that, Stephen. Obviously, when we get started on a foot that's not ideal, it kind of sets the stage for some challenges throughout the year, and some late planning, some soils and some low lying areas that really never became fit, and that kind of set the stage for again some challenges, I guess you could say. So we had, and again chime in anywhere, but we had a handful of tests that we looked at this year, and Some that worked okay, some that didn't work so well. I guess I want to talk about the things that didn't work well first. I'm a bad news first guy, but I think it's important to bring them up. One that I was super excited about was, and Stephen works with us and on all our tests as well, is looking at biology in the planter box. And the reason why, again, back to that agronomics thing, I mean, I want to insert agronomics into everything I can. And I always felt like planter box, biology and agronomics, the theme behind it is, okay, are we just going to use talc? If we're going to put talc in, maybe we can think about putting some other things in with that talc. And I had several tests out. They didn't show this year. And
Which nobody's did,
Right.
because we did the same thing on our farm, and
Yep.
we got the exact same results.
Yep.
This is a horrible year for testing.
it was a tough year for a couple of things, and that was probably the most disappointing, because I looked at some pretty big Cadillac products, and I by no means am going to turn my back on those and shut the door on that. But
Well, and I think one of the other things that makes this past year, so 2024, such a big year in terms of you want that data more than any other year that I've seen personally, is us going into a tight margin space.
Sure. Yep.
So
Yep.
when we're really focusing on ROI, and I've said this, and I will probably continue to say this for every podcast, unfortunately, for the next year or so, when you're going into a year where your margin's really tight and you're really focused on ROI, that's the first thing that you're going to cut. And if it doesn't prove itself, it's gone. And we really needed stuff to prove itself this year, and we didn't see that.
in some things. So
And I would tell you, I was at Farm Progress this year. That was probably the number one question I got from folks coming up to the booth and talking to us, was asking about some of those Cadillac biological products. How have they performed in our trials? Do you trust them? We know things are going to be tight next year from a margin standpoint. What do I need to be cutting and evaluating? And so we know we're going into that type of a market, which is why having good data to help back up those decisions is really important. But again, this year was a tough year for testing those biological products, but just because something didn't work one year doesn't mean it's not still going to provide value to your farm over the long term, right?
That's right.
We focus so much when we're doing trials on 1 year data, but also if you look back at 5 years of data and evaluate how does that perform across your farm over 5 years, over 10 years, that's, I think, a better way to make long-term decisions about what's right for your farming operation.
right.
And if stuff is tight, I mean, that is a valid question for you to ask yourself. Where do we start saving some money? And I can see why that's the first question in people's minds, or the first place that they go. But I do agree with the repetition, and we need to have multiple years of data.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can't put your eggs in one research basket, and not just one trial either, right? That's why replication is so important. But yeah, I'm definitely not interested in closing the book on that by any means. I mean, part of me says, okay, it can be a good thing too if you're looking at soil health and saying we didn't get a benefit of that. Does that mean we have some pretty good soil health conditions where we did those plots? When I think about that. But the other part of that is, again, I go back to that inserting agronomics where we can. We're already going to put talc in, right? We're going to use a lot of talc. If we can get a benefit out of putting something else in with that talc, why not? And it doesn't have to be the Cadillac program. I tested some Cadillac products, but there's stuff that can cost $1 an acre, right? So there's other options there as well to look at. So I don't think we need to abandon that by any stretch of the imagination.
And even if you're talking $1 an acre that provides a 3 bushel, 5 bushel gain, that's still a win.
Yep.
I mean, it might not be the huge double-digit numbers that you're pulling with more of a higher price product, but at the end of the day, a win is still a win.
Super easy to use too. I mean, that's just one of those things. Planter box biology is super easy to use.
I think one of the things too about biological products is we got to make sure we're using them in the right place, and that's hard to evaluate. Environments, year over year, conditions change so often. We got to be thinking about that. But whenever we can pick up a free pass, right? Let's always try to do that with talc product. But it's important to know that biological products provide value a lot of times when there's synergies with other things that are going well.
Sure.
Whenever you have these really tough environmental conditions, that's when you can lose the opportunity. The example I like to always give is putting phosphorus solubilizing bacteria has worked better in some studies done at University of Illinois when applied with a sugar product in furrow, because the sugar and the phosphorus solubilizing bacteria work better together, and in the right conditions, that's how you get a multiplicative effect. 1 + 1 = 3.
It's that synergy.
And so if we have tough conditions where planting didn't go well and then we got dry, you're going to be capping your top end yield potential, which is where a lot of those biological products can provide the huge advantage. And that's just the way it is with a real biological system.
Yeah, when you're operating in a stress space in a already tight window of yield opportunity, things like that aren't going to show themselves.
Right. And when you're talking about soybeans and inoculants and things like that, I mean, historically, inoculants were kind of hit and miss, particularly in cropping systems where you were planting soybeans every other year or what have you. But, we keep looking. We keep looking. Like you said, there's synergy considerations there with other products. There's variety of different types of biology and some biology with some nutrients added as well. So there's a lot of places to look and a lot of stones to underturn.
And I would even go so far as to say we don't even really know how to test biological products correctly yet. Again, I'll reference when I was at University of Illinois, we did a biological study, and we thought all this field variation is going to be what's throwing off our yield results. So what we did is instead of doing different treatment strips across the field, we did small plots, and we paired everything. So here in this table would be no treatment. Josh, your table, that's a treatment. So we got them as spatially close together as humanly possible and did that across the whole field, these paired comparisons. It was completely random.
Yeah.
We could not find, and we thought this is the way to test biological products, do them in paired comparisons, eliminate spatial variability. It didn't work because the environment that year was not conducive for biological products and didn't work.
They can be a little subjective too. I hate to say that. So one other thing I want to touch on is I don't know if you've messed with sulfur in soybeans. We're all Purdue people in the room, and I know that they've done a fantastic job.
How to get it in there.
Yeah.
Boiler up.
They've done a fantastic job of with their sulfur trials over the years. I've not had as good a luck, not gonna lie. And I've got 2 or 3 things that kind of stick in my head. I had a sulfur trial out again this year that I thought we were going to see something significant in, and we did not. And so it goes back to that whole thing with sulfur is, the planting date. Okay, do we have a lot of that natural sulfur release coming when the soil warms up and the temperatures warm up? Because we know that organic matter is going to release some sulfur. And planting date, soil type. The other thing to me is I think a lot of really high paying sulfur tests are done on lesser soil types. Which we're sitting in a pretty good area here as far as soil types go. We don't have a lot of sand, a lot of roll, but the other thing to me is I've kind of come to realize, I'm doing a lot of sulfur tests on people that are religiously putting sulfur on corn, and I think that has a kind of a pretty big effect on what you see on the bean side as well.
And I know a lot of it comes down to soil types and lower organic matter soils where you might have that response.
Right.
I would tell you the first agronomic recommendation I ever made was in Piatt County, Illinois, on a farmer, and they hadn't put down sulfur in 20 years. Yeah. And looking at the soil test, it was clear you need to put sulfur on. And they were
that situation,
they were trying to grow 90 bushel beans, and they put sulfur down, and they've got it, and they've never looked back.
Yeah.
Their responses have gone down every single year because they're building sulfur into their soil.
It's part of their system now.
And I think that you mentioned Purdue. I think that Purdue was kind of on the earlier side of the sulfur recommendation and incorporating sulfur back into your program. And I think that the reason that they have had such a good response is because they are going onto soil and ground where we haven't seen that sulfur application for years.
And some lesser soil types too. I mean, where they're doing some of those tests or some areas where you've got a lot more sand.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you're talking about bringing it back into a cropping cycle where you haven't seen it for 10, 20 years, well, obviously that's going to pay.
One thing that we had this year, again, when I talked about the weather conditions, is we did have delayed planting this year. And there's a couple things that's one of the big factors, I think, in a lot of our tests was planting date. Typically if we're going to plant a little bit earlier and maybe some cooler soils, and you may see a little more response from sulfur, you may see a little more response from biology because the biology is not as active in the soil, right, when the soil isn't warmed up enough. But having a delayed planting where temperatures were up a little bit, to me, is definitely going to be going to take something away from some of these tests. The other thing is was really hurt us this year, and we'll get into it when we talk populations, is the dark, good, well-drained soil that we have around here let us down this year. That's the soil that typically would be the highest yielding, areas in the field were actually some of the lowest yielding areas this year. And that's because they were never fit at planting. They never dried out. And Then when it did dry out, they dried out first and they dried out hard. So it was kind of like that double-edged sword. So that definitely, when that soil is not carrying the field like it normally does, it definitely throws off some results.
Well, and I wouldn't even say carrying. I would say it is to the point of hindrance at that point.
Yeah, that would hurt it more than helped it this year.
Yeah, and when you are talking something that is that drastic of a swing from last year to this year, getting information from that is dang near impossible. I mean, that is, you are faced with an impossible task at that point.
Yep. Yeah, and I like what you said. I had multiple customers tell me, hey, the area of this field that usually carries this field is actually letting it down this year.
Yeah.
So, and it's a rarity.
When we're pulling down our average on our best acreage, that's just never a good sign.
Yep.
But Josh, I think this goes back to something you said before too. Of this year we had some unique environmental conditions, so we need to be, as we look at data exclusively from this year, we need to be wary that we're not going to make all of our decisions based on these average yields, these trial results, because what we know to be true as agronomists and folks in agriculture is, man, this soil should be performing better than it is. Don't overreact.
And the reason we think that is based off of years and years in history, not just one singular year where we hit a record yield and we're never looking back.
Yep.
So again, that repetition is key.
Yep. It's a marathon for sure. So
it's a marathon, not a sprint.
One other thing I definitely want to get into is talk about some population tests a little bit. And that's a wide-ranging topic and a topic that we've had for years and years and years, and we still have. And I want everybody's input on, especially yours, Jordan, on because I'm sure you have a lot to say about population tests. So
I have a lot to say about everything. Don't you know me?
Historically, for me, population tests are kind of funny on any given year because I always feel like for me there might be two populations that have nothing to do with each other that stick out. For me it was always 30 and 34. Whenever I do a population test, and I'm not talking about looking at the return to seed yet, but we would just do population tests. Okay, 30,000 looked good and 34,000 looked good. So what do you do, right? And this year, and actually the years that I've studied as well, if you're strictly looking at the population and not diving into the return to seed, it's kind of that way. It still kind of speaks that way. This year for me, 35, I think, and 31 stuck out, right? Well, then we dig a little deeper, and Steve and I have talked. Hey, did our population test really didn't show us anything this year? But I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. And to me, there's two ends to this population debate. Okay, the reality is, one of them is, do we need to go out and put a bunch of seed on a hard, drouthy clay soil? If its yield's going to be capped off, let's just say at 220 bushel to the acre, we know we can raise 220 bushel at 30,000 plants per acre, right? So we got a seed savings aspect. The other end of it is, how far can we push our highly productive soils? Would you agree with that? I mean, that's kind of...
Oh, yeah.
So on a year like this year, when we just said that our highly productive soils let us down, that definitely threw a wrench into a population study, particularly when you look at return to seed and the economics of it.
But I think that does give some indication of how can we push those acres and when, and what is their floor and their ceiling.
Right.
I think that, and obviously there's so many products and technologies, et cetera, that are available today that were not available 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that ceiling isn't a true ceiling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, give me your thoughts, Stephen. I mean,
from a risk management standpoint, it's also really important to understand where the floor and the ceiling is, right? Because not every year is going to be like 2024. So how do we understand what our max and min potential is across all those soil types and then make better decisions? So I would agree with you, Josh, that we're learning things about what's the right way to manage these acres and these soil types, even in a year like this.
So make your case for VR seeding. Is that your case for VR seeding? I mean, seriously. I mean, because I've even had seed guys tell me that they struggle with that with VR seeding when they do their population tests.
The struggle that I have with VR seeding is I don't know what the weather's going to be this year,
right.
And so we'll go back to the data conversation. I think there's an opportunity to learn more about our cropping systems and our environments and our data year over year to make our decisions even better, Josh, so that our VR seeding can improve, right? A lot of, I don't know, how do you make your VR seeding maps today? Like, how do you draw those lines?
Strictly by soil types. And we probably can do better. We've had the discussion on management zone creation before, and obviously there's a lot of different ways that you can look at a field. But I think most guys still typically do it either by topography or by soil type maps. For
And
sure.
I think that if you're making a case for VR seeding, that's how it's always been done. And I think that's going to continue to be the case. Some of this is, let's not reinvent the wheel here.
Sure. The 2 points I guess I want to make this year on VR seeding. Number one is I think we've proven that, particularly when you look at our return on investment this year, we've proven that we can still raise pretty good corn at some lower populations. And we're not even bringing in the corn hybrid, fixed ear, flexed ear discussion in as well. And I get that's a big, huge part of this, but we show that we can still raise some pretty good corn at 31, 32, or 30,000, depending on the soil types. And again, this year, it was the mediums. I'll call them the mediums, for lack of a better term, to be general across our
mids.
Yeah, the mids across our listening territory. But the mids carried us. They were our highest yielding soil types this year by far. So
it's the Goldilocks rule, right?
Yeah,
it goes back to not too much, not too little, just right.
Consistent, right,
Yep.
good and consistent. And I you fall in love with some of these soil types. I mean, everybody loves their dark, well drained soil, but sometimes these mids or mediums are they always give back. They're pretty consistent and they're kind of fun to farm and have to work a little bit at them. Right, they're not quite as easy to farm as maybe as the dark stuff, but I guess it gives me confidence that we. My story for variable rate seeding is we can still raise good corn at low pops and on lesser soil types. We saw that. We saw that this year. We see that every year. So I guess that gives me the confidence that we can do that.
When you see those mid soils, based on the results you've seen this year, would you push your mids higher population than maybe you have thought in the past? Right, because in the past it's let's decrease our populations in our tight ground. Let's be defensive. Let's be aggressive somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
How do you think about changing?
I'm an aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm an aggressive guy when it comes to mids. I mean, I'm an aggressive guy when it comes to clays.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a historical viewpoint that I'm not going to put any fertilizer on this rolling hill because it's not going to produce. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
It's not going to produce without good fertility levels.
Correct.
For sure. So I think that yeah, I would say so. I'm more interested in, we start looking at that 39, 38, 39, and even maybe 40,000 in 30-inch rows. That's a lot of plants. It's a lot of plants. So to me, it's how far can we push the threshold in that dark ground. This year it didn't work, and it wasn't going to work, right? Nothing worked in that dark ground this year. So this wasn't a good year to see it, but I still think we need to find that threshold. And again, looking at return on investment, I mean, the reality is we didn't get beat bad in our 39,000 population by any means, but our best return on investment were lower pops this year by far. I mean, by a long ways.
But I do want to say, since we kind of glossed over the whole variety specific, you wanted my opinion, that's my opinion. I love to bring that into the conversation. And you want to talk about floors and ceilings for soil types. I love to talk about floors and ceilings for knowing the varieties that you're planting and what they are capable of performing at, not only from an ROI perspective, but from a population standpoint too.
And it used to be years ago, those varieties would sit in research for 6-7 years before they get released. Now it's not. They just get turned over
pretty
that
quick,
fast. So
yeah.
I think a lot of times the seed companies can try to give you that information, but they may truly not 100% know. Go back to that whole who's the guinea pig and rely. I tell guys, rely on your seed guy. Get all the information you can on your varieties. So full disclosure, again, just disclose the data. So our highest pop was our highest yielder in this. Now, it obviously wasn't the highest return on investment. Our highest return on investment was significantly lower.
And that's what we're looking at.
Right. So which was still really
Unless
good.
everybody wants to be planting 39,000 across all their acres.
39,000 and 31,000 was our biggest return on investment.
And that's something you got to watch out for, right? Is higher populations don't always make the economic sense, and that's why VR has an opportunity to shine.
So the moral of the story is don't just look at yield. Look at your numbers. And I there's a lot of people that don't look at their numbers. They just look at the yield.
Well, you need to look at yield by how many plants you had, right? Like if you can have same yields at 39,000 and the same yield at 34,000, it goes back to the seed cost, right? Seed savings and how do we evaluate that? But I also think about yield on a per plant basis. How do I optimize the yield on my acre and then on a per plant basis? And a lot of times, sometimes it's at higher populations because we can push it, and sometimes it's lower.
Well, when you plant 39,000, you got to manage it like it's 39,000.
Correct.
And is that what we want to see going into next year?
No,
maybe not.
Exactly right. So there is validity in this in this test.
Yeah.
And I also think that VR seeding is something that a lot of folks who have modern planter technology have the ability to take advantage of and maybe aren't.
Right.
And so as we go into these tough economic times, there's an opportunity to squeeze more ROI out of your acre by using some technology that maybe you haven't taken advantage of every year via our seeding.
Yeah, 500 plants per acre is a couple bucks. You know, that's
worth it.
Yeah, a couple bucks. I mean, so
that's a biological product.
Absolutely. So yeah, definitely.
Or
something.
not.
Right. So anything else on your mind? I know we've got a little bit of hydraulic downforce. I don't know if you got a thought on that or anything else you wanted to kind of cover on your end.
I think with hydraulic downforce, it goes back to kind of the ExactEmerge conversation where we thought, man, let's never go over 5.5 mile an hour. When speed isn't the metric that we should be using to evaluate our planter performance. It's uniformity, but the upstream of that is ground contact.
Sure.
And so how do we use this system to provide even ground contact, even as our margin, we're trying to keep our margin static so that we can keep our ground contact static, but we're going to adjust our downforce. And especially when you're in highly variable soil conditions, highly variable fields. I've looked at a lot of hydraulic downforce data over the last 3 years, and there's 2 fields that stand out to me. One of them was in Southern Illinois, and on that field, there's high variability, topography changes, soil type changes. And if you look at the average results from our hydraulic downforce testing, there's no difference between active and set. And if you go into it and you look at the topography and you go look at it by soil type, it was a 17 bushel advantage for active systems because it can adjust in those transition zones.
That's where it sells. That's where it sells. Yep.
And I think that's across the board. You're going to look at technology. Your vision window is getting narrower and narrower, and we're looking on a per plant basis or a per acre basis, but really narrowing that field of vision down to what is the best way to achieve the best yield.
There's all these opportunities, but I would also say the importance of having the local data shines. The last example I'll give is ExactShot. This year, east of the Mississippi, we have basically seen no response to starter fertilizer across the board. And that's our continuous application. That's our ExactShot system. We just weren't increasing yields.
And I'll say the same thing I don't have those published, but I have tests out there that say the same thing.
The same thing. Yep. And we've seen that across the board. West of the Mississippi, I've seen positive responses in Iowa, in Nebraska. They had a different growing season than we did.
Did they get in earlier than we did?
A little bit earlier, yeah.
Okay.
And that helped out a lot. I mean, shoot, I live in Southeast Iowa now. Southeast Iowa was planted before Indiana, Ohio was. I remember coming over here and they were just starting to plant in Western Ohio. And it's like, well, we were done. Corn was emerging.
Yeah.
And so that has a big impact. So I can't just take the, say, national average starter fertilizer response from our John Deere trials and say, that's what we got this year.
Right.
Because it changes for your location.
We even see that based on across our territory.
Right.
That's quite the spatial difference there.
Well, and in another one of my disclaimers for row starter, I look at row starter as part, depending on if you're talking about 2x2 or in-furrow, and you're probably referring to maybe in-furrow a little more. But to me, 2x2 row starter, when you talk about 2x2, is a part of a nitrogen program, an overall nitrogen program. So to me, that's what it's about. I want to split my N, and I want to use 2x2 or 2x2x2 as a means to do that. So just disclaimer on that, right?
Oh yeah,
for sure. So if you're talking about overall nitrogen, whether just adding that extra 30 or 40 pounds of nitrogen didn't pay at all, that's a totally different discussion on nitrogen efficiency and some things like that. But again, back to that planting date, back to soil types, back to again the challenges we had with some of our lesser soils here. We definitely had some things that kind of skewed us a little bit this year, but it was reality. It was reality we lived in. For sure. So,
and unfortunately this year, I think the guys either fell into one of 2 camps, and that's that they were more focused on the calendar date or they were more focused on their soil readiness. And I am not saying that there is a correct camp to be in this year. It was just which one did you look at stronger?
Well, and we went through this back in 2019 where we couldn't plant until June 1, essentially. And I don't think guys were going to go through that again.
I think that scarred a lot of people. Well, people on the heavier clays, they did take that completely into consideration, but unfortunately on June 1st on the calendar this year, it still wasn't fit. And they were forced to go.
And you know what? It worked out. Had we not planted until June, we'd have been in trouble because we turned off really dry in late August and September.
I remember this spring, exact same thing happened out in Iowa. There were guys who got started right away and everybody's like, you're nuts. Why would you do this? I actually, there's some farmers I go to church with, and 2 of them planted early and 2 of them waited, and we were having conversations. They're like, you're crazy,
and you're
man.
stuck in the middle, right?
Exactly. And I told them, it's all going to depend on how the end of the season comes down.
That's right.
And what happened is we turned off really dry. The crop dried down super fast. The guys who planted early got their full season, got a lot of advantage, and the folks who waited lost a lot of their top end yield potential. I'm not saying that their decisions were correct or incorrect at planting. It's just mitigating risk. And we don't know what the weather's going to be in September, but the decisions we make for planting do have an impact.
Planting early in good conditions usually works out pretty well.
As long as you don't have those hard frosts and those snows that come in.
Right.
I mean, that's really the only scary factor that you have to worry about that makes you kind of sit back and think.
And planting early in conditions that aren't great is usually not a good idea.
Well, that's never good.
So,
but this year they did warm up fairly quickly.
Right.
And I mean, it was not overly wet.
So one of my other questions for you guys would be on weed control this year. So I remember driving across the state of Illinois, and there was water hemp everywhere in August. It was all over the place. Weed control programs did not work. We had a lot of escapes.
Right.
What'd you guys see?
Similar.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, water hemp's got a long germination period. It'll just keep coming and coming. And to me, this year was one of those years that if you would go out and say you wanted to in March, we had some good weather and you wanted to spray burn down, thought you were going to plant in April, and then guess what? We were delayed 30 days. So you're totally off sync with your weed control program. And we had a lot of that. I mean, obviously we had just enough rain early on to keep things germinating, but water hemp's here to stay. I mean, it really is. And it's a tough weed. Yeah. And without getting into herbicide programs, I just think, people are really, really tentative to spray maybe some certain types of herbicides that may work really well, but may cause some issues in the community and things like that. And we're gonna have some tough decisions to make on water hemp for sure. But yeah, we had that. I mean, we could never get ahead on weed control. Yeah. You were always chasing it. That's what I kept telling guys. You're chasing your tail on weed control right now because because you had that 20 or 30 day delayed planting window. You could never catch back up on weed control.
So we had a See and Spray demo sprayer this year, and we have one or two.
I think one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, Courtney actually got the opportunity to demo it with some of her customers. It moved over to Wabash, and we were really looking forward to demoing it over there. And how many times did we get ready to go? And nope.
It rained.
Yeah, it rained. Go figure. It rained. Yeah. So, but we were looking earlier in the season and before we got canopy, and that's when we were really looking to see that technology shine, and we never got to showcase it. But
and that honestly, that was late in the season too.
Yeah, but I went out and scouted some of those fields, and I'm honestly kind of glad because I think that the comment about chasing it, you're always chasing it. I don't know if we would have seen the chemical savings this year with that data that we would have seen on a traditional and typical year because there was so much weed pressure because that herbicide program fell apart very quickly.
Right. It just ran out.
So
you just ran out of time. The reality is with water hemp, you need to spray it when it's 3 or 4 inches tall, and I guess that could be a
that's the case for
tremendous case for See and Spray. Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. Is having that See and Spray technology to go out and see those weeds that you're not seeing it on your drive-by farming, right? On your road scouting, so to speak. And
well, you should not be road scouting.
Well, I agree with that.
That's another hill.
Yeah.
Another soapbox for another day.
Yeah.
The other thing about water hemp is we got to control it in corn before it gets to soybeans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we got to start being proactive about it. And this is another place where I think See and Spray can provide some benefit because dicamba products they're expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive to spray in corn, but if we're just trying to go and kill that water hemp, lower use rate, maybe reduce drift by reducing the overall load of the product in the environment. Let's do that. Let's use the right products in corn to get ahead of the problem in soybeans.
The right nozzle, the right pulse width modulation. Absolutely. We've got some tremendous spray nozzles. Again, a conversation for another day. But I agree. I've always said that too, even with giant ragweed years ago. The key to controlling weeds and beans is controlling weeds and corn.
Yep.
For sure. So again, a lot of exciting things to help us with some of these challenges for sure and some of this technology. So I guess to me, when I think about wrapping this up, I kind of, again, want to close the loop and say, we're blessed to have some really great tools, and we've got some agronomy and analyzing tools, courtesy of John Deere, that we can work with. And the key to me is, Jordan, look at your data, look at your information. We talk about a lot of stuff here, but everybody listening to this podcast, if you're a farmer, has access to the Ops Center and has access to these tools. And if
for no additional fee.
Absolutely. If you're collecting your data, make it work for you. Go in and look and see what what pays and what doesn't pay for you. Okay, if you're talking about variable rate seeding, what's my return on investment for the seed outlay? You know, the money I'm spending on seed versus the yield I'm getting, and you know, am I achieving yield at 32,000? You know, for a lot less money than I could be doing at 36,000. And you know, we've got the information there. Got to do a little digging sometimes.
Yeah,
and get your elbows a little dirty digging down to the nitty gritty to see what's paying. But this is definitely, I think we're making a case today to let that data work for you.
Yeah. So my personal testimony for this is my husband, he's a banker, so he's overly analytical when it comes to the financial component of what they're putting on their acres. And ROI is his driving force, obviously, as it is everybody, but for him especially, he's like extra.
It's got to pay.
Yeah. And so he's been going through all of his yield data and their yield data for the year, and he'll try to make a case for everything. And I'm like, hey, listen, can we pull another layer? Why don't we look at this compared to soil type? Or why don't we look at this compared to, you know, our topography and our elevation? And we can make a case for it maybe with what you're saying, but let's go back to a more practical application of that and explanation for some of the things that we're seeing. So case in point, utilize your layers to the max.
And the biggest shout out I would have this winter as you're looking at your data, try to cut out your headlands, because if you're doing a hybrid comparison and you plant one hybrid around the headlands, then you plant half the field and then the other half of the field is a different hybrid, that headlands pass will completely throw off your yield evaluation in Op Center when you're looking at yield summaries.
Which is so easy to do.
It's unbelievable.
It's so easy to do. Make sure you're taking out your headlands to get a true comparison in the field. Yep. Like so many times I talk to farmers and they haven't taken it out, and it completely flips the hybrid comparison.
It did that for me in that one of the biology tests, and especially if you have trees around, you know, or deer, and we all have the deer numbers are growing, you know, with the damage. So that's great advice. I mean, and if you're doing any in crop work and turning on the inroads and stuff like that, it takes a lot of stuff, kind of some fluff and junk out, and get you down to the kind of the heart of the matter.
And that'll help you make better decisions about the seed you're purchasing next year, about the chemistry you want to use.
The technology.
Yeah, the technology. And all that is coming from the information that we have from Operations Center to help us make better decisions.
And it's easy to do. That's an easy way to filter out the inrows. And again, we are...
Not to add more to the analysis paralysis.
Right. But that's a pretty simple process. But the reality is we've got to, you know, I'm glad you brought that up, Jordan. Hey, let's look at this compared to this or X or Y or Z, because the reality is we're getting a lot of data. Every machine pass we make now, if you think about the exact emerge planner, back to that, it's bringing a lot of data in. It's a lot of layers to look at. So, you can kind of paralyze yourself with data, but there's also some good things in there to check out. And when you can press make 2 clicks in the Op Center and compare yield versus any other layer, it's pretty simple to do. So the information's there.
And it's really fun to do.
It is. Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Go figure.
Yeah. Kind of nerdy. Yeah. We're like to do the nerdy stuff, Jordan. That's for sure. So,
I just lump all the agronomists. Sorry.
Yeah, the nerd factor is pretty high in this room today, Stephen. You
know,
we usually say it's just Jordan and I. But
I was going to say that I did tell Josh multiple times. I said, I'm just going to sit back and let you two nerd out all day.
So funny enough, a couple weeks ago, I got the opportunity to sit in a meeting at John Deere headquarters with an agronomist from New Zealand who is the manager of a farm in Malaysia growing silage corn so that they can have the first dairy in Malaysia to provide milk for their country. Okay.
Awesome.
So cool. These are some of the unique opportunities that agronomists at Deere get to run into. And it's this well-experienced, really awesome agronomist from New Zealand, myself, and a bunch of John Deere sales and equipment guys sitting in a room. And he brings up, there's no CEC in my soil. I have to manage all my fertility differently because the soil is so eroded. And he and I go off on
spoon feeding
20-minute conversation about irrigation and fertigation and planter applied fertility and strip till and humic acids. And everybody in that room looked at me and him like we had a third eye. We were nuts.
I love it. I love it.
We nerded out, and I think I scared some folks at John Deere. So that's what happens when agronomists get in the room.
Yeah, I always tell people agronomists are a different breed. They really are. Yeah, we get excited about weird things.
We do.
That's funny.
No, it's great. I think that everybody needs a little bit of that. So find your thing and manage it well.
I was going to ask him for a little future insight to wrap this up, but that's a pretty good story. You know,
Yeah.
that's a great story. I guess that does kind of get to show you that we're reaching in other areas and some of the impacts that we can have on the world and what we're doing and what John Deere is doing and you know, advancements in technology and yields and
Outside of iron.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And again, for me, for everybody at John Deere Agronomy, it really does come back down to how do we help a farmer be more profitable? That is our driving mission. That is our goal. And I think we do that through our technology and these types of conversations. But our goal is how do we help make our customers succeed?
Love it.
I can't say it any better
Nope.
than that.
Thanks a bunch for joining us today.
Yeah.
This
Thank
was
you
great.
guys. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
You've been saying that since November 5th, right?
Yeah.
No. Merry Christmas just comes out after Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thank you guys so much for the opportunity to come here.
We appreciate you coming. This is fun. We could go for another 2 hours, but we probably need to wrap this up.
Yeah, we probably do. But this just means that we'll have to split it up into multiple episodes, right?
we gotta do
So
this again.
we'll see you back again.
Yeah, bring me back. I'd love to talk some more.
Sounds good.
And with that,
Talk to you next time.